Yay!
Hello.
Hello. Hello.
Hi, Mahret. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thank you.
So good to see you.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me to come on.
Yes, I'm really happy that you're here and that you, yeah, are free and really want to participate in the series.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. Wow, it's like 7 already. So I think this meeting like 2 minutes before 7 really works out perfectly fine.
Yeah.
I see that the connection seems to be stable.
Yeah,
So
I was trying to play with the lighting, but I think this is okay.
yeah, so I see you are at the gallery, right?
Yeah, just long day, so I ended up staying after because we close at 6, so I just
Ah,
thought
okay.
I'll
So
just
you
hang
stayed
around.
longer because I had also the idea that probably since you are at the gallery, so probably you could also like
Do a quick
do,
walkthrough.
a super quick walkthrough so that people can see the
Yeah,
space. That would
I
be super nice, super
I can
nice.
do that. Did you want me to do that now or wait for a few more people
I
to
think we
come on?
just maybe I just like start with the introduction, and
Okay.
then when it comes to, because I have a couple of questions regarding your current show, so yeah,
All right.
so I think we can do this then. So we don't need to just
Let's do
talk
that.
about it, so people can also see it. So yeah, first of all, I would wanted to say something about this whole series. It's for the fourth time now, and for those like visiting now or listening now who haven't been there before, it's a series we kind of set up as a reaction to the COVID 19 restrictions, that we weren't able to have talks and panels and guiding tours. Like right now, we can offer guiding tours in small groups, but we didn't know before that when and if this could happen. So we started to implement this tiny series also in reaction to like a current political situation. So when we saw that art institutions, companies and private persons, of course, started to post that Black Square for Blackout Tuesday, and some got critique for that because like with the question, what are you actually doing within your institutions against topics like racism, discrimination? How do you deal with the idea of diversity within your institution? And these are questions we are asking ourselves for quite some time now at the Museum Angewandte Kunst. And we decided to not post the square, and we're thinking about other ways how to address this. And with my current exhibition, Life Doesn't Frighten Me, Elie, where's Comme the Garçons, there also is like a political part to it, where we address the fact that Black bodies normally within exhibition spaces, they aren't like there as like subjects or like artists or like yeah, like actually like acting subjects. They are there like as objects in paintings, or as kind of like weird form of decoration, like in the back, not really talked about, not really discussed about. We had a very nice talk with Dr. Natasha Kelly last week about this, who really like digged into this and made like a tiny documentary out of it that was shown at the Berlin Biennale 2 years ago. Yes. And now, Sakhile, you are like the fourth guest.
Thank you.
And yeah, first of all, I would like to quickly introduce you, Sakhile Malthare, that you founded together with Daniel Hagemeyer, the Frankfurt-based Galerie Sakhile&Me. And about your person. You hold a doctoral degree from Northwestern University and wrote your dissertation on how contemporary artists work alongside art curators, historians, gallerists, and other art experts in the gatekeeping process within contemporary African art. And this is something I would like to talk to you about later on. And now, as I just said, you are based in Frankfurt at West End in Frankfurt with your gallery Sakhile&Me, and the gallery has a focus on contemporary art from Africa and its diasporas. And you work with young and established international artists and curators. You have solo and group exhibitions. You participate in international art fairs as well, and you cooperate with private collectors, other galleries. You organize talks and publish books. And okay, that's actually quite a lot. And so in order for me not to talk any further, because this is actually, you are the guest now, you can talk about your work now. I would like to start with the first question, which may be like a random question, but why Frankfurt actually? Why are you here?
Yeah, a lot of people ask me that. So first I'd like to say thank you again to you, Mahret, for inviting me to be part of these talks. And I'd like to just say hello and thank you to everybody for joining us. I think part of the reason why I get asked this question very often is because I'm actually not from Frankfurt. I'm not from Germany, so I'm not an Afro-German. And I've actually only lived in Germany for a little over 2 years. My partner, however, is from Frankfurt. So I moved to Frankfurt to join him, and we ended up opening the space together, in a sense, leaning into each other's strengths. So the space itself is inspired by my doctoral research, but we work together to build it, to also nurture it. And that's, I guess, the short answer to why Frankfurt.
So, and how is Frankfurt actually treating you? Is it like a good place for the work you're doing? Because I think I'm kind of from Frankfurt. This is like the area where I grew up and where I also got my kind of like my artistic foundation. So I'm kind of a fan of Frankfurt to begin with. And I think it is a very good place for art and for artistic practice. Also, like within Germany, because all other cities you can reach in a quite in a short time. Then internationally, it's connected very easily internationally. And since you are also participating, or mostly participating in like international art fairs as well, so maybe Frankfurt, for this, like on the pragmatic side, is maybe a very good city to be in. But what about like the art scene, the connection to the art scene in Frankfurt?
Yeah, I mean, so for the reasons you just mentioned, Mahret, I think Frankfurt, for pragmatic reasons, is an ideal city, I would say, for art, for sharing art, particularly because it is an international city, not just in terms of the population in Frankfurt, but also the movement that a lot of people actually do pass through Frankfurt. So we've actually had visitors who were going somewhere else and Frankfurt was their stop. And so they came through to visit us for that one day. They're here and they left. So in that sense, it's been very ideal, but also in terms of the art landscape, Frankfurt, I would say, since I've, in a sense, moving here, I am still new, so I am learning a lot about the city itself. I would say that in terms of contemporary art, it wouldn't be considered a hub the way that, say, Berlin might be considered a hub for contemporary art specifically, but it does have a very, I'd say, widely respected, perhaps in the German context, museum landscape. I mean, you're a curator who works at one of the more established museums, and that's one of many in Frankfurt that I would say are well respected in the city itself. So in some ways for us, that's ideal because a lot of the work that we're doing is educational. So it's ideal to be in a city that does have this museum landscape, And on the other hand, we also have the university. So there are a lot of students and researchers, people who do want to come in and engage with the work on a deeper level beyond the aesthetics. And so the people who do come in very often are their intentional visits, who actually, they're people who really want to learn about the artists that we're bringing in into Frankfurt and the work, their specific practice that they're doing.
So have been, when you just mentioned like university, have there been like cooperations so far? Is there like a real deeper interest? Because like probably like for like the curatorial studies course, for example, which is taking place at the Städelschule in collaboration with the Goethe University. So has there been like an interest for cooperating with your gallery so far?
So, I mean, I'll be completely honest. So we officially opened the space during Frankfurt Gallery Weekend, that is 2018. So that was September 2018. So we are a relatively young space, but even before we physically opened the space, we did reach out to different institutions. We reached out to museums, the university, in a sense, looking for those partnerships or seeking those collaborations. And what we found is there are individuals in these institutions who are open and excited about the programming that we're doing and want to be involved, and some have been involved, but not necessarily with the support of the institutions they're part of. So we have had people from the university come in and invite a couple of their students or come with a couple of those students. And we have had some curators, including you, who've been part of the, welcoming artists who come in. And Daniel and I feel like this curator would really not just appreciate getting to meet this artist, but actually getting a chance to sit down with them, even if it's not in the museum context, but to start a conversation, perhaps for future possible collaborations. So the short answer is we found that there's individual interest, but not necessarily institutional interest, at least not yet.
Yeah, because that would be the next question. You're saying like not yet. So do you think this is like maybe in the beginning some sort of where people are just like curious and want to see what's going on there and really think about how to engage and how to connect? Because like after all, I see that more and more institutions they are opening up for the blind spots they are having and for the parts of history that is not being told in the art history, so that they sense there is some work that needs to be done. And so maybe this is more slowly process, but I really feel that people kind of institutions kind of open up. So maybe this is some kind of beginning. Would you say that this is some kind of beginning, and maybe in 1 or 2 years there would be bigger collaborations, maybe a curatorial course, organizing an exhibition at your space, probably
Yeah. No, I mean, as I mentioned, we acknowledge that we are a young space. So even when we approach institutions, we write to the director, we write to several curators who are overseeing what we think are the collections in that institution that are dealing with perhaps African art history specifically, or the idea of diversifying their programming. So we have been we've thought carefully about how we approach the institutions, but we do also see, we're humble in that approach, right? We see that perhaps for some of them, they're still waiting to see how we're growing, and they're still waiting to see where our the general progression of the program itself before they commit, before the 1 or 2 curators in that institution who have shown the initiative actually commit on an institutional level. So I think that's part of it.
I was actually, the next question is something I actually initially wanted to ask later, but I think it kind of fits here, because your work as a gallerist is also deeply rooted in your academic work. So when we met for the first time, I really had the feeling or the idea that of course it's a gallery you're running, but that it's also kind of I don't think like experiment isn't the right word for it, but that you really wanted to go into like the practical part. You had like, you did your theoretical research first, and then had the idea, okay, so let's do it. What I
Put
was
it
like
into practice.
thinking, put it into practice, really.
Yes.
So how does that come together? Is this something that is still playing like a major part within your work, or is it now kind of common gallery business you are doing?
No, I mean, the hybrid approach does influence the way, I mean, it influences the way we work with the artists we work with. It also influences the way that we think about bringing people into the space and introducing them to the work that we're presenting or the artists that we're working with. Because as I mentioned, I think it is an influence from that researcher, educator side or background that I have, that it is very important for me to talk about the specifics of this particular artist, why they work with this material or in this medium and not that medium, or why they work across different medium, why or how this media contributes to the kind of content they're dealing with in their work. And so in a way to walk through people the same kinds of research questions I was asking of how artists position themselves, but not just as producers of artworks, but in relationship to the people who are creating knowledge about their work. Yeah. So I think that very much so influences the way that we work and the way we frame the exhibitions themselves.
Yeah, that's what I see, because you not only have like a show, so you always like invite people to talk about, you give like guiding tours, so that this there's some kind of like educational approach as well, that you're really trying to introduce something. And what maybe this is like the right moment to educate on your current exhibition as well, because it's kind of like connected also to the question I was asking, how your gallery is like really accepted and implemented within the Frankfurt art scene. Because right now there are I don't think that this is like normal, but there are like some exhibitions that kind of deal with very similar topics. And there's like the huge Frank Walter retrospective at MMK. Then there's my exhibition that also deals with like the idea or the question, like as well deals with the question about like Black body in a museum space, and how you kind of navigate through like mostly like white, predominantly white societies, how you kind of adapt like what is like projected onto you and create something new out of it. Then there is a very like a small exhibition I just visited yesterday, which is like set up together in this Städtische curatorial studies context at the Friedrich Gallery, which was also like super interesting, because the like Larry Bonchaka, he's like a Ghanaian exchange student at the Städtische right now, and he did like a site-specific work there, and which also deals with like positioning of like Black artists within art system, so as it is like right now. And then of course there's your exhibition, Figures, right now. So do you think that this is seen, this connection, that actually within Frankfurt first of all, and also within these specific times, there is actually something
happening,
very interesting going on in Frankfurt?
Yeah.
I would say.
Yeah. So I think with the 2 years that I've been here, it's difficult to give sort of a generalized statement of whether this is a general shift in the way that art spaces include not just Black artists, but artists of color in the exhibitions that they put up. But I can speak to the experience of learning about the different art spaces, including the museums, that a lot of what happens, at least in my experience in Frankfurt, is that events happen in silos. So there isn't really sort of communication between or across the different institutions or cultural spaces, so that there is that mapping of the different, you know, the different exhibitions that you just listed right now, including figures happening here, so that people do see what is happening and how often it's happening, or whether it's just happening right now, this time of the year, and then it's quiet the rest of the year, or it happens this year and then for the next couple of years there's nothing. So I think it's really a question of mapping, so that there is some pattern that's seen. But from my experience, I think a lot of things happen in silos, and this is probably something that is worth changing.
Yeah, but what would you say? Why is that? Is there something something that like really connects it? Is there something missing? Because there was like one article, I think it was in FAZ, which kind of like connected the Frank Walter retrospective with the exhibition at the Museum Angewandte Kunst right now, in a way, which was like super interesting, because like, of course, I see all these connections, but so I feel that probably like journalists, writers really need to see that there is a topic and that this could be like worth writing about. That is like nothing that it's not really like laid out there, because there's no connection. There is not a whatever black German art magazine which like draws like this connects the dots, or makes the connection. Would you say would this be a solution for this? Is this something we need?
Yeah, yes. The short answer, I think, from just based on the interviews that I would do with the research, one of the things, actually one of two things that did come up repeatedly is that on one case, we need to sort of see the importance and the necessity for advocates. So people whose they put an intentional focus and pressure for these kinds of changes to take place, right? And they're the ones who are sort of pointing out or calling people out when they say, on one hand, claim to be about caring about the different social issues, but they don't reflect that, not just in their programming, but also in who they employ, you know, which curators they include in their decision making. And, you know, who is in the room when decisions are being made, and who is in a way locked out or only brought in to put out small fires, you know, those kinds of things. We need this consistent commitment on one hand. And then on the other hand is the infrastructure. And when we think of infrastructure, very often we think of the physical space. So the gallery space, Sakhile&Me, is one response, you know, to have a physical space where people might expect to find programming or exhibitions that do represent artists who are often not given the space or the priority, let's say, right, over a committed period of time, not just for an event or a theme during 1 year. But at the same time, infrastructure also includes things like documentation or archiving, or having people in the institution who are responsible for making sure that that history of the institution is being recorded and taken care of. I think both things are important.
Yes, but maybe this is like the beginning of this, you know, that people kind of see the necessity with like because I was talking about like I don't know, like maybe like positive connotated events happening around that topic in Frankfurt these days, but there was this whole controversy about the painting shown at the Stede, which also kind of, which for me is like it's like super interesting to see what actually is happening there. So that on the one hand, you of course have like the critics who kind of argue for the like removal of the painting out of the like permanent, not like not like out of the exhibition, out of the exhibition, and how like also like the Stede reacted to that. And I'm like super interested in the like in between, because, you know, of course there is like the history of the painting. That it is like part of German art history and was there. And this is like important to acknowledge, of course. But at the same time, what I always find super interesting is when people like argue and say like, yeah, but in the 80s it was like this and this, and there was like this whole art movement, and it's like really embedded in this certain discourse. I'm like, yeah, but if we like look at the 80s, then we actually also need to look what else happened in the 80s. That in the 80s, it was a time when Audre Lorde was at the Free University in Berlin, and where actually like a Black German movement, like really like in Western German movement, really like started to form. It was also like the time of Maya Yim. It was the time where this super important publication Farbe bekennen was the foundation for this was laid. So this is also the same time, and it's not only that some artists like Jörg Herold got onto this thinking like, oh, okay, racism, there's something going on here. Maybe that is not, maybe I need to whatever address this in a way in my artwork. It is also like, okay, yeah, that's true. That is one part of the story. But what about the other story that's not told in this process? And so maybe some over this, there could be a thinking from side of the institution to, okay, maybe there's something we're missing, and there's something we need to educate ourselves on. And maybe, I don't know, maybe for a specific time, it might be the right decision to remove the painting, to really think, okay, how can we really contextualize this and then show it again in another context later on? Because I don't think that it is the right discussion to talk about like what art paintings should be like removed and not to be shown again. I think it's the context is important to be thought about.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Two things that came to mind when you were talking. On one hand, I'll say this again because I do think it's important that what happened at Städel is not an isolated incident. That's one. So to consider the other similar kinds of attitudes or responses to the use of or presentation of Black people or Black bodies as disposable or dispensable, right? And then to then turn around when people do stand up and say, and there's an outcry for presenting that violence as though it is state sanctioned, because these are public institutions that are displaying this. And then on one hand, to use the argument of the art museum as somewhat apolitical, I think that is very disingenuous and harmful. Really, because the museum as a public institution, it does have the responsibility for what it puts out. So the kind of, not just images, but the kind of knowledge and information it puts out. So I really think when, because a lot of people did come to me to ask about my opinion about what was going on at the Städel, and some of them were people who hadn't been to Sakhile&Me, and they're really only coming to me as a Black voice about what was going on. And I said, this is an example, what's happening right now, this exchange between us is an example of what the issue is, what the problem is. And so really on one hand to acknowledge that this is not an isolated incident. Last year, there was a demonstration at the Schön with another issue where the institution was presenting what was essentially a racist overview of a certain or particular artist, but the institution was resistant, let's say, to address that. And I imagine in the 2 years that I've been here, these are not the only two examples that I have, that we've had, but I imagine there were several other examples that were there or that took place before I moved to Frankfurt. And so I think this acknowledgement of on one hand, it's not an isolated incident, but also on the other hand, that the museum is not an apolitical space. It's definitely not an ahistorical space, but I think therefore not an apolitical space. Yeah.
So you just mentioned that, first of all, I completely agree, but you just you just mentioned that people like approached you. So they were asking like for a statement and for your opinion on what was happening, right? Because this
Yeah.
is, okay.
Yeah. So they were asking me to offer some perspective based on the work that I do. And essentially, I mean, my response to that is I'm not opposed to sharing my political position or our position as a gallery doing the work that we're doing. But I think it would do an injustice to the work that we're doing, or disservice to the work that the artists that we're working with are doing, if the only time or the first time we are introduced to an audience is in response to the irresponsibility of another institution. And so that was really what I was pushing back against. So yeah, I think I think it's what we said at the beginning of the conversation. We just need more. Inclusion is the bare minimum. This is what I said, my response. Inclusion of more Black people and people of color in positions of decision making, that is the bare minimum. But what you do to the in the structure or the way that you run whether it's your company or an institution, what you do or you change in your policy in an effort to accommodate these new people that you're bringing in is really possibly just as important, I would say. It's not enough to just have one or two people who are then just the face of either diversity or showing that you care, when you're not actually changing things in the substance of how you're running the institution.
Exactly. And that's interesting to see, because I was just a couple of days ago, there was like an article in the Süddeutsche about that in Berlin, the Stiftung Preußischer Kulturbesitz, I think you heard of that they got like the suggestion to, because they are too big and need to kind of like split up, and because that's also like connected to the necessity or to the idea, and especially within German institutions and art institutions, to actually fundamentally rethink the way they are working and the way like they approach like possible audiences. That it is still, and I think it's the matter all over the Western world, you know, it's a bit more complex topic, of course, but this kind of institutions, of course, this is a problem all of them have, so wherever they are, but especially like in Germany, that there's still this fundamental understanding about like this ground idea what the museum is and who is the like typical normal visitor of it's also like a very class related issue, and then there is this huge hesitation to really kind of like open up and really talk about the exhibition, really show the exhibition, really engage like other visitor groups within to the museum and to the museum work. It's always this elitist idea about what a museum is and what who's really like supposed to go to a museum, and this is something I think, and especially like in Germany, I think this is like even like more deeply rooted, or not more deeply rooted, but I think it's not really challenged enough. And so, and because there are like examples like popping up like again and again, and then it's not enough, how you say that some person just comes to you and says, what do you think about this? And it's like, what should I tell you? As you know, what I haven't talked about before. And so there's the necessity is there. There's all the solutions and the suggestions are all there. It's actually important that they get implemented. And I think another it's, you know, on the one side, it is really like important and good that as a person working in art and culture, that within these institutions you have like a secured position where you can like really work over years, and you are like kind of safe. You don't have the hustle of like really having to deal with, oh my God, I only have a contract for 2 years, and you know, this is like on the one, it's a very positive side of this, but on the other hand, it makes like institutions not very flexible, because then you have like, it's that you can't really change it and create like new positions, and it's just yeah, because I work in an institution, so I know how like institutions work, and I really understand why these processes are so slow, and it's not always the institution's fault. It's that, you know, of course, the structure fault.
I mean, I think, so the thing is, you know, we talk in these terms, and this is something that I don't know how successfully I do it in the dissertation itself, but, you know, we talk in these terms, institutional, structural problems, and it's very abstract, right? But something that I think is worth thinking about is that institutions and structures are upheld through practices and through decisions, everyday decisions that are made or not made by individuals, right? By groups of individuals that carry these out. So that's why I say it is important to have advocates, but consistent commitment to changing the way that things are being done. So yeah, I think that's, of course, I think I'm repeating a little bit, but I do think that these are important. Yeah.
So it's not so easy, because, you know, we can like discuss this, but we are like I think completely on the same page about about the things that need to be done and need to be addressed. So maybe to give a bit more like to present something more, like give something more to see, we should maybe show your exhibition, since I just said in the beginning that you are within the gallery. So this time it's not only a talk, we get a time tour through the exhibition.
So I'm going to do this. Usually when I'm giving the tours, I start in the front room. So I will go ahead and do that for you. So in this first room here, so just for those who who missed the first part, this is Sakhile&Me. The exhibition that's currently on is Figures. And in this exhibition, we have works by Mbali Dlamini, Tim Okamura, Adelaide Damoa, Tagne, William Jeppe, and Tega Akpokona. And in the first room, we decided to present the work of Mbali Dlamini, who is a South African artist who refers to herself as a visual researcher. So the idea behind her practice is really to think of a way to use the visual as a tool for study, but also as a way to guide the viewer as to what it is that they're looking at. And so Mbali Dlamini went to Dakar, Senegal, to learn about the indigo practice, which is an indigenous practice. And what she realized there is that it was very difficult for her to actually learn about this practice, because like many indigenous practices, it's dying out. So she actually had to leave Dakar to go to the southern part of Senegal to learn more about this practice. So what we're looking at here are images that she found in the National Archives. And these 5 prints are just a small selection of a larger series that she worked on. And then in the...
And excuse me, I have a short question about this. Because I think it what just came to my mind is that it's like also super interesting to I think to see how this like indigo practice is, as you just said, is kind of like a forgotten practice. But I think that was like commonly known for like how it stays like in connection with this wax print thing, that like some fabrics and printing techniques are kind of seen as African techniques, but actually aren't. which are like also like connected to colonialism, and were like kind of imported to the African continent, which is also kind of, I don't know, but what I really see and really like is that a lot of artists and also like designers, fashion designers, kind of research on like older techniques, like in fabric production, and also like in coloring, like in printing production. And that's the idea that just came up, you know, that there some kind of always is a connection to European history in a way, in everything, that it's how people say like, no, we are only interested in Western art. Kind of, and it's like, yeah, but you can't really see it without the connection. And then like also like so-called African art also has this weirdly this connection.
Yeah, so I just noticed that my battery signal just came on, so hopefully this carries through. So I'll just do a quick pan of the works that are in the main viewing room. So
the whole exhibition is on still until beginning of August, right?
Yes, it's on until 8th of August. Yeah.
Okay.
And usually we are offering small group viewing sessions, and usually these are an hour tour. I walk through and talk about the different artists and their practice, and this is very important for I think a group exhibition, so that people really do come to appreciate each artist. Because one of the things that is a challenge when you have a group show is really getting people to appreciate each artist's practice, rather than walk into the room and say, I like this visually, I don't like that, and then they don't actually end up engaging with any of the works in a meaningful way. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah. All right,
you're back on
I'm back. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so you told me when I was there that it is a bit like new to that form of exhibition, that you are concentrating like on the form, like on figures, like because the exhibitions before were mostly kind of abstract. It's not.
We had some on figure and some on abstract, but this one is quite intentionally about figurative work. And so, as I mentioned, each exhibition, and I'm happy to talk more at length if somebody is interested, but each exhibition we really do think through, one, connecting it to some of the questions that I was asking through the research, but also thinking about what is relevant now. And so we were noticing that there's an interest, what I call a celebration of the figure or the form in artistic practice, particularly in contemporary African art. And I think to me this makes sense, because it's what I say in the tours is, if you imagine somebody underwater for a very long time and suddenly they have a chance to come up for air, you wouldn't tell them, oh, you're breathing in too much oxygen, you know? So it makes sense that so many people want to see as many Black bodies represented by other Black people as possible, because for a very long time, Black artists and artists of color have not been given the space to express themselves in this way, to decide how they will be seen by others. They're the ones who are framing the context through which they're being, or the lens through which they're being viewed. And what I wanted to do in this exhibition was really to go beyond this question of representation, to actually look at how are artists using the human form in their work, in their practice. What materials or what medium are they working with? And how are they using that to communicate the substance or the content of what they're dealing with in the work itself? And so we do that with each of the artists, the 5 artists in the group show. Yeah.
But actually, that makes total sense to me, what you just said. Like the idea that there's like a hunger for the representation of like the idea, how is the Black body like represented or shown by Black artists. Like this makes like total sense, and this kind of like really connects to yeah, not maybe not like super obvious, but like I see the connection to also like my exhibition now, that there was that Michelle really had this. She's not an artist. She's like a creative person. Like so she's a designer, so of course she has this way of thinking as well, but not really like deeply theoretical. But of course, from her research, from her visiting art shows, exhibition, she always realized that this, okay, but where's my story? Where are like
I don't see myself in
yeah,
the space,
I don't see
or
myself
I don't.
where like Black bodies presented, and if they are, you know,
How are they
then
presented?
they get a brick thrown at their head in a way, or are just like are there, and you know, and we all have like with studying art history here, it's kind of, you know, I'm just reading this book right now from Museum Angewandte. She's like from the US, and she's in this book, she's really is a really thin book, so and she's talking about her experience like studying art history, and how like in you know, that there's this typical part of art history, of course, is this like a image description, so you describe what you see, and this is like super interesting to see what people see when they describe a picture on artwork, what they see and what they don't see, of course, what's in there. And there's this one famous TED talk where I forgot the name, I just remembered it, where in this TED talk the person tells about like also like art history classes where the whole course was discussing about like the dog in the picture or the tree in the back or whatever, but not about the Black person, like obviously standing in the picture. It was just kind of not there. It was like a filter. This is super weird when you really start. So when you're like sensitive for this, and then you are like, how is this possible? And I mean, I studied like art, like classical art history. Okay, I changed then and went to art school, so I don't have this like classical university art history
background,
education background, but I know how it works because like half of my studies I went to university. And I had this talk with Yvette Mutumba 3 weeks ago, where she really had like issues to find someone who was like wanted to work with her on her PhD, because she wanted to write about like a Black German diaspora, like African diasporic art practice, also like within the GDR, with all the Africans from the communist countries coming to the GDR to work there. Also like there were like artists among them as well. So, and people just told her, no, this is not a topic. No, but that does not exist. And so she went to the UK to write about a German phenomenon, which is, so I can completely understand this hunger or this necessity to just like see yourself reflected. And that does not necessarily mean that is like, of course, it's not ourselves. But just to see, it's just a form of recognition to say like, wow, that the institution kind of signals, yes, we get it. We see that you exist, that you're there. And then the next step, of course, should be to really create the space, which is something that Michelle Elie kind of does with what she's doing, that she claims the space and then creates it the way she wants it.
I did want to just from what you said, it made me think of something that came up in another conversation that I had recently. This idea that, I had somebody ask, why is it that Black artists or artists of African heritage are looking for validation? This is the word that was used, looking for validation from not just the Western gaze, but really from institutions that for a very long time historically have been hell-bent on keeping them out, right? And I did point out that there are individuals who on the continent, but also in the diaspora, are creating alternative spaces to so-called historically Western spaces that have been hell-bent in keeping Black people or people of color out. And when I say out, I don't just mean, as I mentioned before, not just the artists, but also in positions of decision-making, you know, how the artists are selected, who's in the room when artists are being selected or when an exhibition is being built, when decisions are being made about acquiring a work or including a work in the permanent collection versus the temporary collection. And so these kinds of issues come up, but I think that one of the things that I was trying to drive, one of the points I was trying to drive across was that if you really want to know, you can find out, because there are individuals and there are institutions who are doing this work on the continent and in the diaspora. And so as an artist, you know, for instance, if you're somebody who's working independently or is looking for people to work in collaboration with you, there are, you know, go online, go on Instagram, there's so many people who are now putting out their work, putting out their efforts, putting out their initiatives, in a sense, in an effort to look for like-minded people to work with, to collaborate with. So we don't have to wait for the already established institutions who are resisting. They, you know, in a way, if something is happening over decades and it's an issue that keeps coming up over and over again and it's not being dealt with, maybe that's an indicator that there is no commitment, or at least long-term commitment yet in that space to make those kinds of changes. So maybe we do need alternative spaces. Maybe we do need alternative leaders, so to speak, to make those changes. So I think just as a comment on that question of validation.
Absolutely, and it reminds me also of something that Yvette told me in our conversation, that we kind of started both at the same time in Frankfurt at an institution. I was starting at the Museum Angewandte Kunst, she was starting at the Weltkulturmuseum. And back then, I don't think that how unique this wasn't really clear to us, you know, that we are about the same age, and it was like kind of like this first step into a like kind of unlimited curatorial position within a museum, within this institution. And then both buildings, even the buildings, are next to each other, and we kind of started at the same time, which is like, I don't know, which is super unique, like when I look back. But back then we were like, oh, hi, you're here, cool, nice.
And did you ever work together or talk about possibilities of working together?
Not really back then. But what was interesting is, of course, we like kind of visited our shows. And back then it was like 7 years ago. Back then, I have to admit that my focus of work also like changed with my perspective as well. So it was like a slow process. Also to really realize these things, you know, as I just said, I had like this very classical art history education, and then went to art school, of course, but I didn't really like connect the questions I had like personally with my work, kind of. This like really started to grow into each other within the years. So that now I can't really
separate the two
anymore. It's like, so no, I'm here, and this only is a kind of political statement already. And so when Yvette left the Kulturmuseum 4 years ago, my first impulse was, oh my God, she's leaving this, you know, this secure institutional position. But she explained that it was super important for her that she had like these years of experience within the institution, and then saw the necessity to build something for her, not for her own, but, you know, for something beside
an
that.
alternative
Because
space.
it can be super tiring to always work within institutions that from the beginning on never had never
you
had
in mind.
never had you in mind. These institutions, they weren't made for us to be there and to work within them. So of course, you know, when you say like, yeah, why are you always searching for validation? This is, yeah, in a way, this is like a really, it's like it's a legitimate question to ask, of course. And but I think it's super important to keep in mind that at the same time we really have to work on creating our own spaces as well, in the, you know, not in a, like my opinion, you know, not in a really from beginning up that it develops into separate directions.
The
idea or the hope that of course it leads together and then like grows into each other at some point. But
I mean, you know, I'll say this again. I think that, you know, for instance, having you as a curator in an institution that is quite established in Frankfurt, I think that is important. So even if, say, somebody might say, I don't think Mahret is involved enough, or I don't think Mahret is X, Y, and Z. Because the thing is, when you're the only one, it's very easy to be targeted for whether it's for good accolades or for criticism, right? But what we need, in a sense, is critical mass, whether it's within the established institutions or institutions that are working parallel to or in, you know, in conversation with the institutions. We need more people, and I think part of that is moving away from this idea of the institutionalized approach to seeking validation. You know, sometimes we have some students coming through who want to do an internship, and for you know, for different reasons, for me, I do not want to have free labor, and so I'm very intentional about that. So the idea of having interns who we do not pay, that's not something that's an option for me, but that's an intentional decision. But to sit with students or researchers who want to learn more about what it takes to run an art space, or what it takes to build an exhibition, what it takes to work with and support artists who are living and working somewhere else while you're here, also making sure that their work is received and contextualized properly, so that you don't get because one of the dangers of the kind of work that we're doing is there are a lot of people who have a very limited idea or perspective of what artwork done by people of African heritage looks like, right? And so I get people coming in and going, oh, I was expecting to see some masks. And I say, well, you know, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, this is great that this person is being exposed to something other than what they thought. But there's nothing wrong with masks, you know. So then I'll mention, do you know about Weltkulturen? They have a collection, you can go there, and they do have an education program, and they talk through about their collection, and they're happy to do that. That's just not what we're doing in this space, right? And then you have new or different questions coming up through those either misconceptions or stereotypes that people come into the space with.
There's a nice comment by Tasneem.
Yes, and
I
think
it has more to do with access to power rather than validation.
I agree.
We have like 50 seconds before this talk ends, and this is kind of a good because
this is a great segue.
Tasneem, we are going to have our next talk.
And so I didn't get a chance to talk about the research that I did, and in that research I was actually interested in questions of knowledge production, power specifically, and structural inequality. So I invite anybody to either reach out to me if you want to talk about that, but I absolutely agree, it is about that, and really looking at how the streams of power haven't, or the power dynamics really haven't changed that much or that significantly, even though we are seeing more representation of artists of color or Black artists in art, you know, in what is considered conventional art spaces. So I will.
5 seconds.
So on that, thank you, Ma.